My humble contribution to the Dungeon Jam 5-room dungeon thing that we're all doing, courtesy of MysticArts and the rest of the brilliant YouTubers that are taking part, is a dungeon all about grief and what happens when a player character goes to the other side. It's happier than it sounds, maybe. It's hopefully more fun to play than it sounds, probably, so that's good. My name is Jason, and I am here because I like psychology quite a lot, and I guess I'm kind of inflicting that on you, so that's fun. Lucky you. Alright, so the way that you would use this dungeon is you are going... when a player character falls and goes beyond unconscious, you're going to plop them into this place. The aim is to work them through the 5 standard stages of grief. I know that there are discussions about how accurate these are. That's not really the point. I am not a therapist, nor am I trying to be, nor do I expect you to be for your player characters. However, there are 5 of them, and this is a 5-room dungeon, so it works pretty well, I think. The general aim of this is to give the player character a chance to work through their own demise and figure out whether or not they want to come back. Sounds like an easy win, and obviously at certain levels, especially in D&D, magic brings you back by accident. It's famously difficult to actually slay a character after about level 5, but that's an aside. You can still run them through this if you want to keep this general vibe going. Dungeon room the first is, of course, denial. Denial is a strange feeling in general. You know somewhere deep within you that you're not telling the truth to yourself or to anyone else, and I think that the best way to represent this in terms of colour is with black and white. The room that the players end up in here is one that is formless, it's shapeless, it's meaningless. There's nothing here because how could there be? There's no admittance of what's going on. The way that this works mechanically is that the players will be faced with a combat. The enemy in front of them will appear as if any other undead. You can choose skeleton, zombie, ghoul, whatever you fancy really. Give this thing the exact same number of hit points as the player character, but give them an AC of like 8 if you're playing in D&D, and make their attacks incredibly weak. The point here is not to make the player have to struggle in a fight. The point here is the reveal. As the undead becomes more and more damaged, their form starts to solidify, and as that happens, you start to reveal that this is an undead version of the player themselves, and as they take more damage, they become more and more alike the player. By the time they finish off this undead, it looks exactly like them, and as that realization hits, the zombie disappears. There we go. They've mechanically denied their own death. That's fun, right? Room the second is, of course, the cross one. It is anger. Anger is such an integral part in grieving, whether it's directed or undirected. It's important. It's also a stage, I think, that in real life people get stuck on, and it can take a lot longer than people realise to get over it fully. We are going to direct it properly in the dungeon, though. We're going to direct it at the thing that finished off the player character. That's very easy to do if they were offed by a particular NPC or a specific enemy, but if they were killed by something more hard to grasp, less defined, maybe a force of nature or something, you can throw an elemental that represents that or some other kind of enemy that you think would fit. Again, you don't want to actually finish your players off in this dungeon. You want them to fight against these forces and be cross with it and kind of vent that feeling in character at the thing that happened. So if it is an NPC, feel free to have them talk up a big game about how they did it and why they deserved it or something along those lines. This time, while the room itself is still formless, there are fires licking up where the walls should be. Everything is red and red hot because that is what anger is. You want your player to just barely survive this fight, properly clinging on by the skin of their teeth, and how you do that as a DM is entirely up to you, whether you run it through multiple times ahead of time to try to make sure the balance is right, or if you just sort of wing it, as so many DMs do. The reason for this is you want them to be ready for the third stage, which is, of course, bargaining. In the real world, no amount of bargaining can change anything, which is deeply upsetting. One of the reasons we play TTRPGs and other games, though, is because we can escape from the limits of the real world, escape those chains, and because of that, bargaining in this particular dungeon, as it is in many, many games, is very much something you can do. As the players enter the stage, the fires from before dissipate and are replaced with marble pillars and a shiny office floor. And as they blink, the thing that appears in front of them is an incredibly large desk. I'm talking full CEO, desk toys, the magnetic ball thing, everything you could possibly want to describe in there, and sat on the other side of them is, of course, a devil. I like my devils to be well dressed, but if you want to go for something different, that's entirely up to you. The ideal here is that the players see the devil and realizing that the devil isn't hostile, don't attack. If they do attack, the encounter ends. Congratulations, you failed the bargaining. We're on to stage 4, but we'll get to that in a minute. If they don't attack, things are very different. The devil summons up a chair on the other side, moves it forwards without touching it, and offers them a seat. They then slide a drink across the table, which can give your player the equivalent of a full rest, which is always fun because they're going to need it in case any more combats happen. You want the devil to be sympathetic to what's happened to the player character. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. Please, if I could offer some help, I would love to do so. Of course, I'm unable to do anything without some kind of deal, so let's make one, shall we? Have the devil be convincing, charming, and genuinely care. Because of course they care. They want something out of this. You want the devil to help them come back to life, but for a price. And the price is something you don't need to have figured out yet. Just have the devil say, you'll just owe me a favour at some point. And when I come to collect, I'll expect you to make good on your word. If the player takes this, you've got an incredibly fun tool in your DM toolkit to pull out at any given time that you feel like later on down the road. If they don't hold up their end of the deal, guess what? They're back in the dungeon again, or maybe somewhere else entirely. If they do hold up the end of the deal, then you've got an incredibly fun session ahead of you. Even better if a few of the player characters have taken the devil up on this deal, because then you can really mess with the story. In the event the player does end up here again after failing to fulfill the deal, maybe the deal gets worse for them. Maybe there's a second favour. Maybe the favour is bigger this time. It's entirely up to you, but it is a fun way to play around with things. Fun with a capital F, and mostly for the GM. To finalise this room, whether they take it or not, presuming the devil is still talking to them, the devil reaches over, shakes their hand, and they move on to the 4th stage. The 4th stage, of course, is depression. Yay! This horrible business CEO room melts away into black tar-like sludge, which fills this immense infinite space up until the player's knees. It is hard to move here, hard to do anything here. It's weighing you down, stopping you doing what you need to do. That's right, this room is for millennials. The colour scheme here should be a cool blue, a cold blue, an uninviting, unwelcoming colour. It is frosty and devoid of any kind of warmth, as depression so often is. This time you're going to put the revivified zombie that the players fought in the denial room up against them once again, this time from health to non-health. I recommend using the player's stats in general, but lowering the health by about 20%. The aim here is that the player character and this enemy can do exactly the same things, but the enemy is ever so slightly weaker. The good news is that this is the final combat in this little dungeon. Also, to really hammer home the point, make sure you describe in excruciating detail how your player beats themselves up during this process. Maybe this is what the player character needed to do in order to be able to find some kind of catharsis, because this leads them to the 5th and final stage of the dungeon, acceptance. The room in this case should be in sepia. It's an aged film, an old room, with lines running down, pixels missing if you want a more modern interpretation, things like that. It's not quite right, but it's getting there. The walls have reappeared and are black and reflective. The same is true of the floor and the ceiling. It's essentially featureless aside from 2 portals. Now, I like my portals to be in arches. It's entirely up to you how you want to do yours, but the important thing is that you describe the portals correctly. One of these is black, and I mean pitch black, way beyond anything light could ever hope to touch. This is the portal to true death, to the afterlife, to the next stage in this character's spiritual progression. This doesn't have to be the end of a campaign, it never does. You can have them play through the afterlife in some way if that's what you want to do, especially if it was a TPK. But the key thing here is that if the player character goes through this, that is the end of this character's life. As they get closer to this portal, they start to hear music, they start to hear murmurings of maybe a deity or the being that runs this version of the afterlife. Obviously, if they've been good, this might be a reward from their own god, and if they've been bad, it could be something far, far worse. The other portal is white. As the player approaches, they hear the voices of those on the battlefield or the people around them when they passed. Maybe they hear people crying for them or pleading for them to come back. Maybe they hear a villain who's gloating because there's no way they could ever be defeated by them. If a player character did not take the deal in the bargaining phase, as they approach this room, they feel their body start to slow until it slows to a stop, a full stop. Mere inches from this portal. Without taking the deal, the player cannot go through this portal. At this point, you can have the devil whisper in their ear from afar, offering them one last chance at salvation, at resurrection. And if they still choose not to take it, the portal destroys itself. If they do choose to take it, then you've got the same deal that you were offering them 2 rooms ago. I do like having the devil offer the deal at a higher price than before. After all, they turned them down the first time, so they need a little bit more to make sure their trust is completely satisfied. But, I mean, you don't have to be like that. Either way, when the player passes through a portal, that is the end of this 5-room dungeon. The player character has conquered the 5 stages of grief in a mechanically satisfying and hopefully a RP heavy session. And whether they've chosen to pass on or come back to life, you've given that player character a proper chance to pick something for themselves and maybe a more honourable and dramatic end. You could even use this whole thing as a really cool story hook. Maybe one specific player went down before anyone could do anything about it, and the rest of the party decides to try to find the devil they'd made the deal with and null and void it. That's a damn fun way to get an extra little side quest in a big adventure, so, you know, do that. Either way, once the player is through a portal, that's done. You finished the 5-room dungeon. Congratulations. Ultimately, I went for this as a more theoretical and vibe-based dungeon over something more mechanical because this way it can fit into just about anything. You don't need to flex yourself especially hard to think of a reason as to why a player would end up here. There's a very clear cause. You could even do it in a way that the player doesn't know why they're here. Maybe they passed in their sleep. Maybe it was a curse that finally caught up to them. Maybe it was a betrayal. The specific reasons are infinite. And so wonderfully varied, and I think it makes this dungeon an incredibly cool inclusion in just about any campaign. Obviously at higher levels you can bring people back from death, so this loses some of its oomph, but that doesn't mean you can't include it. You can still have it as a roleplay moment where the deal is still offered, but then it can be nulled if somebody uses like reviving magic or something like that. Or you can offer something more with a deal. Maybe they're not just going to come back to life because they know the player has that covered. Maybe they're going to give them an item, or they're going to give them a feat or a level in a warlock or something else. You can still entice them. This is a great way to include devilish deals into your campaign. And you should. It's so much fun to give players power in exchange for owing favours. It's very much you as the DM going, you can have this shiny thing, but I'm going to mess with you later. And who doesn't love that? Anyway, with all of that out of the way now, it's time to note that this is, as I said at the beginning, part of a big collaboration among the many dungeon tubers that inhabit YouTube. MysticArts was the main instigator of this whole thing, but plenty of other YouTubers have been important in this, including the likes of Naigobi, Paladin Pros, and Lunatic Dice. You should 100% check out the rest of the dungeons as well, which will be in a playlist, which is in the description. So check that out, watch some of the other incredible dungeons, and if you're here from one of those, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, and if you are going to use this dungeon, like and subscribe, let me know, and I will see you next time.